and counts no matter who you are. For the casuals, we're grinding here. Talking sports without the doubt. No need for rules, no golden binder. This is Sportsball Grinder. This is Sportsball Grinder. This is Sportsball Grinder.
Welcome into another edition of Sportsball Grinder here. Appreciate you joining us. It is a hit the gas and turn left kind of weekend here on the Grinders. We head into Memorial Day. Want to talk a lot of auto racing, and to do that, we've brought in a very special guest. If you're an old fan of the Gridiron Breakdown, you've heard this voice, but just in case you haven't, the Ayatollah of rock and roll, Dr. Funkenstein, Mr. 11, and the man who thinks music's been outpriced so damn long, maybe they deserve Napster. I'm talking about the one, the only Matthew Grouper. What's up, Matt?
Hey, how are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Long time. Hey, glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Glad to be talking with you, because if there's anybody in my life that's an expert on auto racing, it is definitely you. And I am ready to talk about the NASCAR situation of the Coca-Cola 600 coming up, where NASCAR is going this weekend. We've talked a lot of NASCAR on the show so far. It's also Indy 500 weekend, so we're going to get into a little bit of that. We got to talk about this Team Penske situation and what is going on, particularly on the IndyCar side of things. And then you're also a football fan. We're going to get into a little bit of some of the news of the NFL and a little bit of college football news breaking late as we're recording this here before the weekend. But first and foremost, I kind of want to give everybody just a set of your bona fides and stuff. Please give everybody the 2-minute elevator pitch version of your racing background, particularly your time covering it, all the things that you are when it comes to auto car racing.
Well, my father and his brothers and their friends growing up were all huge NASCAR fans, all street riders. My dad owned a 34 Ford with a hot late 60s Chevrolet engine in it. So I grew up watching NASCAR. My dad bought me a Darrell Waltrip Matchbox car, the 11 Mountain Dew car when I was a kid. Even though he hated Darrell Waltrip, he started something he couldn't finish there. And I just grew up with it. I'm not going to tell you that I've watched every lap of every race in the last 30 years, but I have not missed many. I was fortunate enough to, I got into sports writing at the University of North Alabama with the student newspaper. I got a part-time gig at the Times Daily in Florence, which turned into a full-time gig. And I was lucky enough that just about the time I started, the only other guy that liked NASCAR was leaving. So that gig fell into my lap. Between the Times Daily, a little time off, and then some time with the Anniston Star. I think I covered 15 or 16 Talladega weekends, Cup. I even covered I think the last time IROC was at Talladega.
Oh, man, that's been a minute.
Brooks, ARCA, Xfinity Series, the whole 9 yards. I haven't talked to everybody, but I've talked to a lot of folks, and I've just, always loved it. And I tell people to this day, I keep meaning to quit watching NASCAR, but I just never get around to it. You know what I mean? It's it's blood, and it's the one redneck thing that I do.
I mean, I hear you on that. I grew up watching this stuff with my brother. He was a big NASCAR guy. I mean, he wrote term papers on it when he was in high school and stuff. So we grew up watching, the Alabama Gang and all of that stuff. The last thing he and I did together before he went off to West Point, which was more or less going to prison, also known as the Army, was to go watch Days of Thunder in a theater. And I revere that film. Fans of the Film Strip podcast can listen to my friend Nate and I talk about that one from a few years back. Nate's a big NASCAR guy. And, so a lot of that was shot here in Charlotte as well. Got on the track several years ago, did one of those ride-along things. My wife bought me that for my birthday. Got in the car with one of the guys that was one of the stunt drivers for Days of Thunder and realized Tony Scott was just ahead of his time. He wasn't wrong. And coming around that turn 3 was very much the same view you get from Tom's car right there in that. So, but I've been a big fan of it, for years. And I'm in and out of it, watching it here and there. My favorite drivers retired long ago and stuff like that. But got back into it a couple years ago and really reconnected and talked to you a good bit this year heading into the season about, okay, give me some primer. How can I get into this? And I've watched a little bit of every race and some of all of the race of several of them. Really kept up with it this year and have been thoroughly entertained by it. For years I think one of the things that me and a lot of other casual sports fans, which is kind of what we cater to here on the grinder, is NASCAR was too hard to keep up with. How do you score points? What is it doing? And I feel like they have refined that with the stage racing and how that goes. It's much easier to follow than it was maybe 5, 10 years ago.
I agree 100%. A lot of folks that, to me, want to be critical just to be critical don't like the stage racing. I know that stopping in the middle of anything kind of seems a little foreign, but we're all football fans and there's halftime. I don't see the problem with that at all. But it came down to NASCAR was throwing a lot of phantom yellow flags, and it seemed like they just needed to say up front, hey, the field's going to get strung out. We're going to need to bunch everybody back up. So let's just set the times where everyone knows what the rules are. It's going to be here. It's going to be here. And as I often say to people online, which I still do way too much, I argue with people in the chat, down in the chat section way too much. If you don't like stage racing, you're telling me that you've never watched 500 miles uninterrupted at Pocono.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm as old school as it gets, but nobody wants to see somebody win a race by 3 laps. And
No. I'm a Hal Higdon runner. I believe very much in you walk through the friggin' water breaks in a marathon, man. You give yourself that 45 seconds to reset, and
right,
you're not going to lose any time doing that. In fact,
right.
I have caught and passed people doing that several times in race. So it can happen. I think it makes it fun, honestly. It breaks it up. There's a strategy to it. Sometimes it's a badly utilized strategy, as we're seeing with a lot of these teams, but it's neat to watch them try to do it. And what I noticed really the first part of the season was that everybody seemed to be kind of going at about 75, 80% until the last 20 laps. And they said, okay, punch it. And then we had horrendous wreck after horrendous wreck. Every race has seemed to end with some kind of drama to it, which is not bad television because sports are built for television.
That's right. That's right. And, it's the same thing with basically it's the same argument with the playoffs. A lot of people, purists, claim to not like the playoffs. And it's like, okay, do you want to crown a champion in October who won one race and had 25 top 10s and had 0 DNFs because that's the Matt Kenseth rule? We have the chase, the play because of Matt Kenseth. I mean, there is a reason why and today, with these cars being so bulletproof, particularly the engines, gone are the days where, you'd go to Michigan and 12 cars would blow motors. It's just all there was to it. I think the year that Dale Earnhardt was at Bud Moore, I think he blew 8 engines that year. That's just not going to happen anymore. So you're setting yourself up for the tortoise winning the race if you don't put some sort of incentive on condensing certain sections of the season, just like the race itself with the stage breaks. It's a product of the technology getting so much more reliable, I think.
Oh, 1,000%. And I mean, I think that's one of the fun things about auto racing in particular. It's one thing that the F1 show that's been on Netflix has really brought people as to how much analytics and engineering, and I think everybody's always known there's engineering involved with it, but how much data is involved in racing. And now that is over in NASCAR as well. And you see these cars, and it used to be like, and you and I are old enough to remember when a stock car kind of looked like the car you could go see on the lot.
Yes.
They look nothing like that anymore. They're all the same. They're just wearing an emblem, which is it's fine. It's all about how the engine's built.
That's 100% correct. And then again, that's another thing I see a lot in comment sections is I haven't watched NASCAR since the cars were stock. Really, you stopped racing after the 1980 season.
Yeah.
Watched a race since the first composite smaller bodies came along in 1981. You are a true purist.
Yeah, exactly. You've been hanging out there for 40 something years waiting for that to come back. And look, that is all an evolution of engineering. Things evolve over time. We get better, we get faster, we get smarter with it, and it's all in the engine. And I mean, that's IndyCar racing, that's F1 racing. Those cars all look the same. They're one of two models. It's all in the engine and the gearing and the engineering and how they go about displacing weight and then managing tires and fuel and stuff. It's a lot of math, which is sort of wild to think about that the most redneck sport in the world is full of nothing but a bunch of math and engineering, but it really is.
It really, really is. It used to be, I think the wind tunnel, there was a wind tunnel. Each manufacturer had a wind tunnel that they had access to, and it was in Michigan, and they would go probably once in the off season and then during the race weekends during the year. So you got 3 shots at the wind tunnel a year. And now all of that stuff's in-house. They've all got that technology, and some of it's simulated and some of it is, actual, tangible, actual physical matter. And it's just amazing how much more they have, so much more data that they have access to now.
Matthew, I can take you across campus here to where I'm sitting right now to the Kawicki Motorsports Lab to the wind tunnel on campus here. And it's just a model of the ones up in Concord and Kannapolis, So, I mean, and I think that's what's neat. I think NASCAR has broadened its reach while honing in on an audience along the way, and that's what's made it fun. So, I think it's a fun thing to watch. It's one of those things that I tell people all the time, like, if you're kind of into racing a little bit, it's like watching pro golf. You put it on, you watch the first couple rounds, you take a nap, you wake up for the last 40 laps, and you pretty well got it. Or you can lock in and watch the whole thing and get a great experience of it, but there's nothing like being there in person too. And you and I both have attended a lot of races in person. And I tell people all the time, like, if you don't think you like auto racing, but you're curious, go to a race. Invest the 50 to 75 bucks for even the cheapest seats, and you will have an experience you will never forget.
That's right. And even more so than this, but for the uninitiated, it's a lot like music. No way that you can replicate through, headphones even in your car, no matter how big your system is, what you got. There is nothing like going to see a band live and the way that bass drum hits you in the sternum and the way like an acoustic guitar can hit. It's the exact same thing with racing. You simply cannot explain how something can be that loud. And of course, the engines today sound a little different, than what they used to. But they're still, it may sound like when you're watching Indy this weekend, or even NASCAR to a lesser extent, it may sound kind of when you're there in person, you feel it down in your gut. And there's a smell to racing, the gas and the tires, and God forbid somebody blows up, because you're going to smell oil all day, even at a large track. There's just no way that you can replicate it on TV or radio.
Oh no, not at all. And but I do think the way it is presented these days is very accessible. And so we're at a transition point in the season. Things are going over to Amazon Prime now, so that's where the Coca-Cola 600 is going to be. That's the race this weekend. And so I want to kind of transition and talk a little bit about that. But as we get into that, let's talk about the guys that are currently in the top 5 in points. And we know it's the top 16 that make it into the playoff cutoff, right? But these 5 names are the ones you hear all the time if you're just kind of casually paying attention to NASCAR. In 5th place right now, Joey Logano's there. He's got 1 win. He's got 1 top 5. He's got 3 top 10s. He hasn't won a single pole all year. But the guy finds his way to the front of the pack every time. And he's a good veteran racer. He's a prickly kind of dude, but NASCAR's been full of those dudes forever. And that's what makes him so interesting, is just when you think he's not there, here comes that car whipping around the end.
Right. I mean, there really is more than one philosophy out there. Several years ago, Kevin Harvick won, I believe, 10 races in a season, and then had a bad run of luck in the playoffs. And I don't think he even made the Final 4 that year. And they asked him how disappointed he was in that. And he said, not at all. If you gave me the choice between winning the championship in 2 races and winning 10 races and not winning the championship, I'm here to win races. I'll take 10 wins every time. That's Kevin Harvick. I think Joey Logano is the opposite of that, because the Penske stable seems to have this philosophy, and I'm not saying that they do it on purpose, but if they're not doing it on purpose, it sure does work out this way an awful lot. It seems like the Penske guys get their one win the first quarter or so of the season. We're at about the third pole right now. They seem to get that one win to lock themselves into the playoffs, and then they will spend the rest of the summer experimenting. And you sort of forget about them, and they sort of fade to the back of, the points they get in, like maybe they're 12th or 10th or ever what. And then once the pay window opens and the playoffs start, they show up. And I think you and I were talking about this the other day. I think that's one reason why Logano has become a little bit of a villain, is because a lot of folks feel like, well, he hasn't done anything all year. He's got one win. This guy over here has got 5 wins, and Logano won 2 races in the playoffs, and they're crowning him the champion. Well, that's the way the rules are set up. If they were using the old point system where, that you were talking about earlier, that's impossible to keep up with, and there are no divisions to the season, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that Logano's team, they're good enough. They're just playing by the rules the exact same way that Jimmy Johnson used to do.
100%. 100. I was about to say Jimmy Johnson made a career out of this.
He absolutely did. It's the same thing. And I think that Logano is right on track for where he always is at this time.
Yeah, right in front of him, William Byron also got a win. He's got 2 poles, 5 top 5s, 7 top 10s. It's a guy everybody forgets about, but he is always running in the top end of every stage, every race. He can race short track, he can race medium, he can race these long tracks. Really good all-around driver. But like a lot of these guys, and one in particular I'm going to mention in a little bit, not somebody that you can really latch into, because he doesn't have like this big personality with him, but he's just a good, solid driver.
That's right. That's another guy that I think there have been a few drivers in the last 15, 20 years that I think have been rushed to Cup a little bit. Byron was probably moved from the Xfinity Series to the Cup Series a little too fast. But now you're seeing why he was, moved up so fast in the first place. He's catching up to his potential, I think. And, obviously he always runs good at plate tracks. To your point, you said exactly what I was about to say, and that he's just solid everywhere. Anywhere you go, he is going to be one of the top, one of the top guys. He runs top 10 all day, everywhere. And I think he's still getting better. I don't think that we have seen him be as good as he is going to eventually be.
No, I agree with that 100%. I don't think we've seen the best racing out of that guy yet, which is something to say because he is a really talented driver. Now, this next one is a guy who has no problem wearing the black hat at all. We're talking about Denny Hamlin. He's got 2 wins. He doesn't have a pole yet, but he's got 5 top 5s, 6 top 10s. He's either in the top end of the race or he's getting spun out. That's pretty well how it's going because he races hard. He doesn't give any foxes whatsoever about anything else on that track. He will race hard. He's very much a throwback to guys like Harry Gant, and Sterling Marlin, some of those kind of guys. The way he drives, the way he reminds me.
I would agree with that. Toyota seems to be in this phase a little bit right now. You see it, I think, with Gibbs drivers, and you see it with 2311. You don't really see it too much with Legacy because they're just sort of behind right now and still trying to catch up. But sometimes Toyota just seems to miss the weekend. They will unload, of course, these days practice limited, just some weekends you bring, you race what you brought. And sometimes Toyota just seems to be out to lunch at a track that weekend. We kind of saw that, to me, Sunday night at the All-Star race. Obviously, Christopher Bell was dominant. But Denny Hamlin, I don't think I heard his name all night. And Denny Hamlin obviously is one of the biggest stars in the sport, but he was an afterthought that night. And you see that sometimes with Toyota, and you can't put it on any one driver. I know that at this point, Denny is sort of the dean, of the garage. I don't think anyone listens to him the way he wishes that they would, but he's been there as long as anyone, and he's capable of running top 5 every week. But I don't know that Toyota is capable of running top 5 every week anymore.
Yeah, I don't know that they are either, which is wild because they've got such quality engine builds. Like people forget Honda and Toyota were engine companies before they were anything else, and they have been on top of that game forever. And them being in NASCAR was a big coup when it happened, but they've just like you say, it's been up and down with the way that they've raced this year. And that leads us to the guy that's in number two. Christopher Bell started up the season hot as anybody. He won 3 races in a row, and one of them he lucky dogged into. But hey, whatever, you get across the line, hey, you get across it. He's had one pole, but he's got 8 top 10s, 6 top 5s. The kid can drive. I mean, he really can. I think he's another guy that I don't know that we've seen his best racing yet, and that's something to say.
It is something to say, and it says a lot that he replaced Eric Jones at Gibbs, which I thought was just ridiculous at the time. I'm like, that Jones boy, as Ken Squire famously called him, that kid can drive. And it's like, well, okay. I mean, you're kind of changing out just the most recent, flavor of the month, but we're seeing now why, and that's no slight, on Jones. I still think he's really good, but we're seeing what Bell, can be. And I think that this is who he is. We said about Byron, we haven't seen his best yet. I think we're starting to see Christopher Bell's prime. I think that this is who he is going to be. Denny Hamlin probably has a year or two tops left in him, maybe 3. I think that Christopher Bell is poised to become the face of Toyota, not just Gibbs. I think he's going to be there for a really long time. He's going to be there for as long as he wants to. Kind of like Kyle Larson, he seems to have a little bit of a heart, in the open wheel, in the sprint car world. So we'll see how long he sticks, with Cup full time. But I think he's showing who he can be, and he's getting ready to be the dominant driver, I do believe.
Well, and you already teased his name there. It's a guy who's going to pull the double this weekend. He's going to do Coca-Cola 600. He's going to do the Indy 500. Kyle Larson's firmly in first place. 3 wins, 1 pole, 8 top 5s, 9 top 10s. This guy, I've said it before and I'll say it again, man. We've talked about it offline. They don't know how to market this dude at all. He should be the most dominant force in racing right now because he's almost always in the thing. He drives the most generic car. He's basically the team sponsor car. He's the Hendrick.com car. There's nothing about him that's flashy. You talk to him and it's just very even keeled. Like I don't think his blood pressure ever gets above 75. Like he doesn't have any of that juice, but he's such a damn good driver.
Yes. He, and it's sort of, we're in this era again, going back to the format that we're in, is you can run checkers or wreckers. You really can be Ricky Bobby and still be successful. And he is the prime example of that. If he's the guy that can go out and be dominant. He can go out and lead 400 laps of a 500 lap race. He's 100% capable of that. He's also capable of busting his ass on lap 15 with a 3-second lead, where you think, why were you even pushing that hard? You won the pole, you ran away and hid within 15 laps. Why were you pushing it so hard that you got into the fence 30 laps into, a 4-hour race? That's just who he is. And I don't think he can turn it off. And under this format, he really doesn't have to, as long as he can remember the playoffs, as long as he can remember the situation that he is in and accept that, okay, this is, this is the transfer race. This is race 3 of the round of 8. I need to finish 8th. I don't need to finish 2nd. I cannot finish 9th. I have got to finish 8th. And I think that's tripped him up a few times, which goes to show you that sometimes, no matter how intelligent a person is, that instinct takes over. And I think that happens to him a lot, but you need guys like that.
Yeah, you do. And you hit on something there. Nobody has led more laps than that guy in every stage this year. There's times you can turn on a race and it's like Larson. Every stage he's leading the laps, whether he wins it or not. He is just getting out in front of people. And that's what I'm impressed with, is that they found a way to tune that car up enough for him to get that far out in front of everybody and hold everybody off. so many times in these races. And that's, comes down to a lot of driver skill, but it's a lot of the guys in the pit as well, keeping him alive and keeping that thing humming because again, it is the most generic car on the track, just about. But he is just out there lapping people every time. It's really something to see. I think we're in for a very fun race. It's going to be gorgeous weather this weekend, high 70s, sunny. If you've ever been to Charlotte's track, it's beautiful when it's like that. It's a long race, though. 600 miles is a long time to be pushing a race car.
Yes, it is. And, someone like him that's sort of small, kind of wiry, kind of a small guy, which, these days, I think there were several drivers that sort of changed the game on fitness, and longevity, guys like, David Pearson and Darrell Waltrip, famously back in the day, going back to what we were talking about earlier, back when the cars were more vulnerable and breakable and things would break and the engines would blow, there was a lot to be said for saving your stuff, and not running wide open every single lap. Well, these days when the equipment can handle being pushed, it's sort of the driver, can the driver handle that much?
Mm-hmm.
That intense, so you're not going to see any Jimmy Spencers out there being
No.
successful anymore, or even Tony Stewart for that matter.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't think you ever find another Tony Stewart in this
No,
sport.
Larson being the little small wiry guy, he's sort of built for a long race and for the long day
Mm-hmm.
coming up.
No, I think he is, and I mean he's going to go from here and go straight to Indy and run that, which is a whole different ball of wax. Like I say, he and Bell kind of dipped their feet a little bit in the open wheel racing and stuff, and so their owners let them do it. But I want to hear from you, kind of predictions. What do you think we're going to get? Who's going to be our top three coming out of the Coca-Cola 600?
Well, I jotted down some names a little bit ago. I cannot think about Charlotte Motor Speedway without thinking about Hendrick. It doesn't seem to matter who is driving those cars. Hendrick is just always a force at Charlotte. Whether it's Casey Mears or Jeff Bodine or whoever, it just seems like those cars are always up front. So I've got two Hendrick guys in the top three. One is a guy that I'm a little down on overall, but I think he's about due, and that's Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott, I told someone not long ago, I said, if my life depended on a top 12, I'm taking Chase Elliott every single time because he's not going to tear things up. He's not going to do anything crazy. But sort of like Kyle Busch, he just does not seem to have quite figured out this generation of car just yet. But he's going to bring it home unless something out of his control happens. So this kind of race, a long distance race, I expect him to have a good night. Frankly, he needs it. They haven't had a terrible year, but they haven't had a special year by any chance, by any stretch of the imagination. It's a lot like Dale Jr. later in his career. NASCAR needs Chase Elliott to matter. He's got the Amazon Prime sponsorship this weekend on Amazon Prime, and that sort of thing. Sponsors, new sponsorships, new paint schemes, they seem to add a little juice to people. And I expect him to have a big night. So I have got him third. Along those same lines, I've got Alex Bowman, sort of the forgotten guy at Hendrick, oftentimes has actually run better than the 9 this year. I think he will have a good night. I think the two of them will sort of carry the flag for Hendrick. And my winner, we talked about him a lot already. I'm taking Christopher Bell. He seems to be red hot. I think he's going to carry that all-star race. Sort of went away a little bit after winning 3 in a row, but I think he's going to pop back up here as we get into the hot months. So that's my top 3. I'm taking Bell, Bowman, Elliott.
I love this because we didn't share notes ahead of time, and we've got completely different people here, which I think is fun. So third, I've got a guy that, again, I think he's in the top end right now, humming in the playoffs, and I think is due. That's Bubba Wallace. I think he's the Toyota driver people have forgotten about, but he can drive a race car, and he's really good on these kind of tracks. I think he's going to be really good. He was running good a few weeks ago. I think he's going to run good again here. I like him. I like Kyle Larson in the second spot. So I go Chevy on that. I think I think of Charlotte. I think Hendrick. I'm going there. But at number one, I've got Byron. I think he runs this track so well. I think he's due another win, and I feel like he is running so strong. He's going to find his way to the front end of that third stage and wind up winning this race ultimately. So I've got Wallace, Larson, and Byron in this one, which I think will be a blast. So it should be a good time as we get into this race weekend. Switching over a little bit to Indy because we got to talk about some of the news. Team Penske has fired their top three people, including Tim Cindric, this will relate to Austin in just a little bit, from their IndyCar organization because part of a cheating scandal that involves modifying part of the car that makes them run faster in qualifying. And that's about as deep as I can get on all of that stuff. But this is a major, major deal in Indy racing and for Penske to make this move.
It is a major deal, and I was not aware until this happened that Penske was caught up in a scandal last year involving the technology around the turbo button. Apparently, they had figured out a way to bypass the times when it's appropriate, when it's allowed to use the turbo button. They had figured out a way to run the turbo button when it wasn't allowed, and they got caught. And whether Cindric was directly involved with it or not, being at the top of the food chain, he's going to get hit for it. Like you said, the modification that they made on the car at Indy, the way I understand it, the second the cars pulled out on the track, people were saying, they were pointing at this part and saying, legal, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of one of those things where you think, how in the world did you think you were going to get away with this? It's like you almost wonder, did someone sabotage you? You didn't seriously, do this yourself, did you? But as you and I, were talking, as shocking as that was, that someone tried to get away with modifying a part, under this, this kind of scrutiny that goes into the Indy 500. If you had told me that this was going to happen, what is Penske going to do? I would have said he's going to fire everybody, because if there is one thing that Roger Penske is not going to put up with, it's any sort of question of the integrity of his teams. Now, everyone cheats a little. They look for loopholes, but their whole brand is clean. I mean, they wear those white shirts, those white polo shirts and black dress pants on purpose. They present as a clean professional operation. And for the upper management of that team to get caught up in a cheating scandal twice in 12 months, that wasn't going to take the taco.
No, not at all. And now, how does this affect Austin Cindric as a racer, and going forward as his year progresses now?
Well, while no one was looking, Austin Cindric has sort of become a pretty solid driver. He was absolutely dominant in the Xfinity Series, particularly on road courses. And he's one of several guys, we talked about Chase Elliott a moment ago, that seemed to be really good in the previous gen of road courses, the previous gen car, that haven't quite figured this new one out just yet. So, whereas I think Cindric was poised to be one of those guys, and I don't know why these two things go together, but it seems like the guys that are good on road courses are good on what we used to call plate tracks, drafting tracks.
Right.
Going back to Bobby Gordon and Wally Dallenbach,
Mm-hmm.
to go together. He hasn't done all that well on road courses, but he has become a force at drafting tracks. I thought he was going to win Daytona again earlier this year before he got caught up in a crash. Then, of course, he does go on, to win at Talladega. So, sort of while no one was watching, he's become a very good driver. I think he would be 8th in points without that rough driving penalty that he got earlier this year. So, a lot of people are having the knee-jerk reaction. They're looking at this and they're saying, his daddy's gone. He's going to be looking for a ride. Well, his daddy was not the one that's won 3 cup races in his first 3.5 years. He's won at Daytona 500. He, again, would be top 10 in points. He's made the playoffs twice. This is his 3rd time to make the playoffs. So I think the better question is he... We don't know what happened with this modification, right? Who's to say that he is not offended that his father was a fall guy for this? Maybe he says, my dad didn't do anything wrong and you made him the fall guy for this. I don't want to drive for this team anymore. I'm going to go someplace else. I love my dad more than I love race. That's just as likely as the assumption of, oh, well, Tim's gone. So obviously, they're going to fire Austin because he's just a Nepo baby. It's just as likely that Austin may not want to stick around. So
Hmm.
this definitely bears watching. This is a big seat that could come open that we did not see coming a week ago. So it's definitely going to add to silly season drama.
It feels like the time when the GM and the owners step in and they fire the coach that has been tied to the longtime quarterback for a long time. And it's like, uh-oh, are they about to trade the QB, or whatever? And maybe, maybe not, even though they've been tied at the hip. Hey, maybe he's good enough to stay around because we can build off of this guy. Like you say, he can drive, he can work for us. Or maybe he says, you know what, forget y'all, I'm going somewhere else because I'm not going to put up with that. I think you made my guy the fall guy here.
It's entirely possible, and
Mhm.
maybe no one is perfect. It might be like, okay, well, dad's job is to get the competitive advantage as best as he can, and maybe he got a little too far, and he had to go down for it, or maybe not. We'll
Yeah. Just kind of larger picture though, what is it about the Indy 500 do you think still holds relevance just in pop culture and sports to this day? What is it about that race in particular that just still draws even the most casual of fans in to watch it? Because I mean, it pops huge ratings every time it's on.
I think it's one of those destination events, sort of like Churchill Downs, because
Yeah, it's a good
how
comparison. Yeah.
people watch one horse race a year. Well,
Hmm.
you don't know anything about anything, but Churchill Downs. It doesn't matter what horse, whatever, it's Churchill Downs. And if they're racing horses at Churchill Downs in May, it's important, right? I think Indy is the same way. Madison Square Garden, maybe to a lesser extent, the Rose Bowl to a lesser extent. But I think the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is just one of those venues that matter with the double grandstands and, just the ridiculously sickening high speeds. It's the one race. If you're an American and you don't give two monkeys about racing, if you're going to watch one race, you're going to watch the Indy 500.
And I think you've made a great comparison with the Kentucky Derby. It's a fashion show too. It's a celebrity event. It's all of those things, and then it's ridiculously competitive and fast. Like you say, you think you see fast race cars in NASCAR, then you turn on the Indy 500, and you're survived anybody. How does anybody live doing that? How do they see enough to be able to turn that, car like that? It's wild to see. Same with some of the F1 stuff, man. You watch the way those guys drive that car. I have no idea how they even know what's happening, at the speeds that they're getting up to. It's insane.
It's insane, and you can't. The Indy 500, Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a lot like when we were talking earlier about seeing a race in person. How you can't replicate the sound. It's also it almost paralyzes you to watch a car coming off of four at Talladega and realize that they're covering a football field, ever how many seconds. But for just that moment, it almost looks like they're paused in time because they're coming off that banking and they're coming at you. And it's like they're just sort of frozen there for a second. But even in that moment, they're covering hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards in seconds. And I think it's that same vibe with the Indy 500, even more so because they're going what, like 235, 240.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's almost like they're levitating around the track in some ways.
Yep.
They're sliding around it in a lot of ways. It's wild to see. So, a great weekend of auto car racing, like we say. Let's get into a little bit of football notes. There's a few things to talk about here. Let's get into the NFL first. Brock Purdy gets the big contract from the San Francisco 49ers. I got to tell you, I feel like the 49ers have had an incredible offseason. They re signed him, they re signed Warner at linebacker, they got Kittle signed up, they signed 18 guys from free agency or draft picks. And I was afraid they were going to overpay Brock Purdy, like to a serious extent. And they paid him a lot of money, no doubt. But I feel like that was a smart contract. It's really a 3-year deal if you break it down that they're going to have to eat, a lot of money on. And it's pretty much we better win this thing in the next three, or we all know we're going to have to blow it up and start over again, which is basically the cycle of an NFL team anyway these days. I feel like it was a good move for them, and I'm glad they finally got it done so that they could move off of that discussion point.
I agree. I think it was a good move for both of them. I think that this is a situation where I'm not taking anything away. I said what I'm about to say to someone, and they took it as criticism of Brock Purdy. I don't mean this as criticism of Brock Purdy, but sometimes you're where you need to be.
Exactly.
You are living your best life and your best destiny where you need to be, and that is Brock Purdy. He does not need to go somewhere that maybe runs a different style of offense, somewhere where he's going to be playing in 30-degree weather. Any number of things. I think he is where he can be his best self. And I also, on the same side, think that he is the best man for the 49ers. I think that they could conceivably go out and get someone who is better than Brock Purdy in that he's got better measurables. He can throw it harder. He can throw it faster. He can run faster. He's more elusive, whatever you want to say. But they won't win as many games and they won't be as successful because he just fits what they do. And it would have been incredibly foolish for him to have just chased more money someplace else just for the sense of chasing more money. And I'm glad to see that that didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look at his own division. Swap him and Kyler Murray
Right.
on their teams. They both are exactly where they need to be. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the Cardinals are and things, but they seem to know what they can get out of Murray, and he seems to know what to do in that system and offense. And then the same with Purdy. He fits in that space. There's maybe 2 or 3 places he could work. There's maybe 2 or 3 places that Kyler Murray could work, but neither one of them would work that well in the other spot. I don't think. I don't think Brock Purdy would be very good in Arizona. I don't think Kyler Murray would work at all in a Kyle Shanahan offense. You know,
I agree 100%. Maybe you could, just for fun, maybe you could swap Tua and Brock Purdy.
yeah, I
You
can see that. Yeah.
could not swap Lamar Jackson and Brock Purdy.
No more than you can swap Tua and Lamar. Like, well, I think Lamar makes every team better, but I don't think Tua would work in Baltimore.
No.
So, like, they're just
No.
not the way he plays, and
Right.
and that's fine. And that's fine. I think that's what's neat about the NFL is watching that kind of scheming stuff work out. So I'm glad they got that done. I think San Francisco is a sneaky team. I felt like they were going to like take another year to get there, but having looked at their offseason now and everything, they're good. I think they're going to make the playoffs, and they could be a noisy team once the postseason comes around if everybody stays healthy on that team.
I agree. They could easily have been in decline a little bit. I think. I think that they did. It won't show up years from now because I'm like you. I think they'll be just fine. But people, that watch closely, they really were sort of at a crossroads. If they had panicked and tried to make some major moves and changed too much and blown things up, I think they would have gone back into a little bit of rebuilding mode. But they kept what they needed to keep and retooled enough that I think, especially in that division, I think they can certainly contend to win the division. And then once you do that, you're in the tournament, as Bill Parcells says, and who knows?
Yeah, I mean every quarterback in that division outside of Matt Stafford is in their mid 20s. They're all 27, 26-year old. Matt Stafford's 37. It's wild to think about Matt Stafford's been playing pro football for almost 16 years, and he's still really good at it. I think the Rams are going to be a team they're one of my top teams to get to the Super Bowl when it's all said and done next year. And he's playing at a high level, but that is coming to an end. You can see the clock ticking at the close to the 11:30 hour we are here. Everybody else, though, there's several years left in the tank of those guys. Darnold, if he can continue his progression, I always thought he would be good. I felt like he landed in two terrible situations, out of USC with the Jets and then to Carolina, rebuilt himself in San Francisco and then in Minnesota. Has done well. I think he'll be good in Seattle. They've still got a ways to go. And then Murray's good in Arizona. They're going to be quality. That division's going to be good. San Francisco's right there to take it. It's going to be a three-way shot for second place. Everybody chasing the Rams, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree. I think all of them did a good job. The Rams, I think you could repeat what I just said about San Francisco. They
Mhm.
easily could have panicked and said, "Hey, we're going to move on from Stafford. He's 37. We're missing some pieces here. We're just going to take a step back for a couple of years and sort of rebuild." But no, instead of doing that, they sort of did a very, very soft rebuild. They plugged some holes and moved some things around, and don't seem to have gotten upside down on the cap. So they've really, that team sort of, just sort of punted on the draft there for several years and went through free agency. And when a team does that, you kind of think, well, they're going to wake up one day and they're going to be ancient the way the Patriots did at the end of, the Brady run. But it didn't really happen with them because they found some young pieces, or replace Cooper Cup, replace the back, ever what, they just sort of, just quietly sort of plug those holes and they've stayed afloat.
The impressive thing is that they found a way to replace Aaron Donald in the Moneyball sense of replacing him in the aggregate. We'll never find another defensive tackle like that. So we're going to find three guys on the line that can just give us that same production. And that's Les Snead in that front office. Yes, they said F them picks for a long time, but they hit on all those middle round guys. And that's so important. I mean, we both talked about it before offline that you got to be able to nail your first pick, sure, but you got to hit those 3 through 5 round guys in a lot of ways. You got to find gems late in the draft and in the middle of the draft, or else you're never going to build any kind of a culture long term. And the window of rookie contracts is you go up and down. So one side of the ball is getting all the money, the other side's got to be young and cheap, and then it goes the other way around. So in 3 years, the Rams defense is going to be expensive, and that offense is going to have to get cheaper. And that's where they live right now.
That's right. And it's, to your point about how the fun thing about the NFL is that, it probably wasn't always this way, but now there are different ways to play. There's different schemes, different philosophies. We can play offense this way. We can play offense that way. It's sort of the same way with building a team now. The Rams certainly were not assembled the same way as this Chiefs, this Chiefs run that we're on right now, or the Ravens or whomever, so it goes to show you that there's no one right way to do it, which is fun.
No, it is. The one thing that all these teams have in common, though, that we've talked about that are at the top end is that they've hit on the most important thing is they got the quarterback right.
Yeah.
They really did. And that is a good segue into what the Philadelphia Eagles have done. And Jeffrey Lurie and his group have just been incredible. And Howie Roseman have just been great at building and rebuilding and retooling. And they hit on Jalen Hurts. They got him in at the right time. They got the right coaches with him. They got to a Super Bowl and got darn close. They got back to one 2 years later, won the whole thing. And now they've won a battle in the NFL courts, if you will, with the tush push surviving, at least for now. They went to the what I call the John Grisham model of arguing your case is go for the emotion when you can't do anything else, and who better to go for the emotions than a Kelsey brother?
Right. Right. It's what did the owner say? Everybody hates this because you can't stop it.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is, well, there's nothing stopping your team from doing it. I think that this is this dominant, unstoppable play. Well, why don't you do it? And then apparently, the count, I guess the antidote to that argument was, well, it's dangerous. We don't want to put our people in that situation, right? It's ban the DDT. It's dangerous.
Yes.
Ban the DDT,
No pile drivers.
why don't you just run it? So
yeah.
I didn't understand how they were going to be able to ban that play with a straight face.
Yeah, there's no data to back up that injury thing. And I think that's ultimately what will get it done. That or somebody abusing it where they just start running it for like a drive, just to rugby people out of the way. I don't think anybody will do that, but if anybody tries it, that'll get it done quickly because it won closely. It wasn't a swing away vote, but I think ultimately it was. There's no data to back up your injury thing, so you're going to have to come back with something with a better argument. And I think ultimately they'll find a way to get out of it or around it, or somebody will figure out a way to stop it,
That's what I was about to say. You and I certainly remember, the Wildcat, the year that, Miami with Ronnie Brown.
Yeah, that was all they had.
Just came out and just embarrassed the Patriots. Who already, I think, had won 3 Super Bowls at that point, just made them look like they had never seen a damn football before. And you think, well, this is just the way it's going to be from now on. This is just going to be a part of football. People said for years that, read option wouldn't work in the NFL. And, then Cam Newton, somebody, who can, run fast and is big enough to eat hay, he's out there doing it. And you think, well, how are they going to stop that? Well, they figured out a way is, you hit him every single play, whether he runs.
Yeah, I'll tell you how you do that. You let him get creamed in the face and no flags. That'll end that forever. But look at the evolution of that. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. All those guys run some version that Kyler Murray does, but they are elusive runners. They know how to get out of the way, which, Cam just ran over people.
Right, right. So it's like it's a modified version of it. So maybe that's what is happening here is the tush. It may not look exactly the way it looks now.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody may figure that out, but there may be some DNA left behind in something else.
And I've seen the Eagles do this out of that formation, and I'm waiting for them to ultimately unveil the full wrinkle of it, where they realize, hey, you know what? We don't have to we don't have to just run the tush version of this. We're going to go ahead and wing out of this now. We're going to throw a ball out of it. We're going to roll out of it. I think that's their next evolution of it because the NFL, if you give defensive coordinators just one off season, they're going to find a way and shut down your favorite thing, and then it'll be gone as of tomorrow. So it may work itself out, but we're past that end. The other thing that passed in the they changed a little bit of the onside kick rules and some of that. Cool, whatever. They're still tinkering with kickoffs so much and kicks that I don't know that they know what to do with that. But the playoff seeding, they were considering going like, you know what, just because you win your division at 9-8, maybe you shouldn't be the 4 seed anymore. They've tabled that for now. The Lions were the ones pushing that pretty heavily. They pulled it off the table, and I happen to feel like they did that because some bird told them, just wait till we do the 18-game schedule, and then we'll consider this. This will probably when it passes. So the playoff seeding remains the same as for now.
Yes, and you wonder, to kind of look over at what college football is doing a little bit with football and seeding. You wonder if they make this change, and I think that they eventually will, where you're seeded based on record and then tiebreakers and the divisions don't matter. Do they do what the NBA has done and just do away with divisions completely?
I think they're leaning to that. Yeah.
I think that's coming, and of course we've seen that. We've seen that in college football already, and we'll see more of it, I'm sure. But us going back to the way it was before the merger, where you'll have the AFC and you'll have the NFC, and it'll be 1 through 16, and it will be listed. And when you look at it, you won't have it broken up anymore. And I do think that's what will happen eventually.
I think they'll always keep divisions because it makes scheduling make sense. It also builds in some bit of rivalry. It gives you something to teeth into. I often say if you're a fan of a team and you're looking for what your team should do, they've got to start by beating the 3 teams in their division. Like that, I think they'll always keep that. But I do think they're going to go to a 1 through 7 or 1 through 8 seeding. And no matter what division you came out of, it's based off your record, and the tiebreakers are head to heads and all these other things that they can get into. But I do think they're going to that ultimately. But I think they'll keep the division structure just to keep the schedule structure working.
That's probably true. Now that I'm thinking of, I hope so. First of all, definitely hope so. And I know a lot of teams out there, like I know the Cardinals, don't want to lose 2 games with the Cowboys every year.
No,
but it would be a shame to see, Packers, Lions, Packers, Bears, Giants, Washington, Dallas, Eagles, everybody, Yeah, we need to keep that.
I don't think we want to pull all of those things off, but I do think we can reseed because that's pretty much what's happening in the NBA anyway. They have sort of pseudo divisions, and then they work at that season's so long anyway. It's hard to ever tell because too many teams make the playoffs anyway. But that's another day on Donahue, as they say. I believe that the NFL is going toward that. Now you mentioned college football; they've already decided this is the last year of the 12-team playoff. Hope you enjoyed it for the 2 years we had it, kids, because we're changing it already, and we're going to straight seeding, which means instead of the P4 conferences or the top ranked conference champions being the 1 through 4 seeds that get the bye, nope, it's going to be off the rankings of the committee. So you can be Arizona State and wiping out the Big 12, but maybe you're ranked seventh. Guess what? That means you're seeded seventh in the playoffs and you're playing first weekend. And I kind of get that. I think it makes more sense than what they were doing because I felt like some of the buy stuff didn't work. But I feel like if you're a team that gets a buy, what you really get screwed out of is hosting a playoff game in your home stadium. I wish they would fix that.
It's an odd privilege to be told, no, you don't have to, host a game in your home stadium. That is a weird. It
Yeah,
is.
so let's turn down that millions in revenue for
Yeah.
this small town in Georgia.
Yeah, exactly. It is an odd reward, to having a good season. I like I like the thing of just going with the rankings because there's nothing keeping the Big Four conference winners from being 1 through 4. All they've got to do is be one of the 4 best teams, and that's still open to them. It's just now that's not going to be automatically handed to you. And I think the more flexible you can be with these things, because that's where the trouble starts, is when you start getting boxed into these rules of, well, we have to do this. And if we do this, then we can't do that. And then we can't do this, but we should do this, but we don't want to do that. That's where the problems start.
Yeah, we start making this more complicated than the tax code. And you know what that does? It turns off fans that are already getting a little tired of how shall I say this, corporate that sport has, but this amateur sport has become. It's all about gambling and television. Maybe we shouldn't say it out loud so much, So I'm hoping they can do that. And on the last notes here for this grinder, I'm just going to tee you up on this one. We've been waiting for it for years. ESPN has come with their over-the-top service. You can just subscribe to ESPN if you want for $30 damn dollars a month.
Yeah, no. I mean,
What?
I can see what they're doing because they have made some of these networks so specialized that if you are, if you've cut the cord and you're going to different streaming services, well, maybe you've got something that does include, mainstream regular old ESPN. Well, if you're even remotely interested in college football, you've got to have the networks. You've got to have your 4 networks, and then you've got to have ESPN, and then you got to have ESPN too. And if you live in ACC country, you're going to want to watch. You're going to need that, and you're going to need the ESPN network, obviously, whatever. So I can see what they're thinking is they're saying, well, you're going to pay X amount anyway for this content. But the problem I think that they're going to run into is, for example, I have got YouTube TV. For years, I had DirecTV. It just got too expensive, and I switched over to YouTube TV. Well, right now, and I stress right now, part of my package for $70 a month is ESPN, ESPN2, the SEC network, and then the networks. So I see everything I want. I don't need that $30 ESPN package. That concerns me. Are one or more of these channels going to disappear from my basic package here in the coming years to push this? Because otherwise, I'm not really seeing the value there, because you can be the biggest sports fan in the world, but unless you've got multiple TVs, and I know there are some folks out there that do that, but we're not talking about the 2%. 98% of people can only watch one thing at once. So to add another $30 package that honestly you're probably not going to watch very much during the week, we're pretty much talking about this as like pretty much a Saturday thing, because you're going to be watching football on Sunday probably. I don't know how marketable that is. Again, I see what they're thinking, but right now I don't know if it works.
I think they are going for the younger viewer that is already inclined to do the bundled deal with Hulu and Disney. And now this is just another $10 if you put those together,
Okay.
by the way, and who are never going to do Sling, YouTube TV, anything like that, and who consume sports through clips on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, things like that, and may never go for the full YouTube TV package or whatever. So, you know what? Let's try to get them in on this and make a new generation of sports fans by this direct way to getting it. It's 20 years behind when we all thought they would do it. But I think they're not going for you and I. They're going for that group. And by ESPN's reports as of right now, and of course all this can change as numbers and money move everything, is they're not interested in redoing deals and messing up things that they've already got with YouTube and Hulu TV and Sling and things like that. They're more interested in, what, cable is dead and it's dying, and we know it is. We're not worried about losing that. We're worried about losing people under the age of 30 that don't subscribe to any of that stuff. But they probably subscribe to Hulu for The Handmaid's Tale, and they subscribe to Disney for all that Star Wars stuff. So you know what? Let's get them in on our side too with this, because we're already giving them ESPN Plus as part of this, which nobody watches, but we have. But you want to read anything, that's how you read it nowadays. You pay for your journalism, kids. And like we used to have to pay a quarter in the machine. Now you got to pay for it all the time. But, some things never change, just the format. But in this case, it's how can we get sports to that group of people in the streaming package? I actually think it's a neat way of doing it. I'm curious to see how it works. And I'm also curious if you say, like, you know what, ESPN and ESPN2 remain with everybody. But if you want the SEC network, or you want ESPN Plus, or you want any of this regionalized stuff, you're gonna have to subscribe to it through this service, because that's the only way you can get it. We're not going to license that out to Sling and DirecTV and all these other places. I'm curious to see if that's what they're going to do.
Well, and that's one of the weird things about pushing 50 is all of a sudden you're not the person that they're chasing anymore.
Right? That's wild, right?
We spend 30 years being in that sweet spot, the 18 to 48 demographic.
Oh, it felt great.
Selling. We're on the wrong side of that. And you see how I reacted to that. I reacted to that proposition as you're taking something away from me, and no, they're content to let you keep what you've got. But there are younger people that right now they're not getting it all. So let's offer them something different for these folks that do watch their clips on Instagram and TikTok and don't watch the whole game. They don't follow a team. They follow a player. They want to see that highlight. They don't care if he scored on that play or not. How high did he jump?
Right.
That's a completely different animal than I can even understand. So this is probably the reason why, they're running ESPN and I am not.
This is true. I feel that too. And I think you're going to see what you're going to see ESPN do, and they're already starting to, is how do we lean into sports that do catch the young people's attention? That's why you've seen the push for soccer in this country in such a big way. They're going to lean heavy into that. They're repackaging the way the NBA is presented. The WNBA is getting presented in a way that it's never gotten presented before. They're trying to build that out, and they're letting go of some old guard stuff. I read today they're willing to sell off the remaining baseball package ESPN is to NBC. Because they're like, you know what? We're not worried about that anymore, because baseball has found itself very regionalized. And they also realized that Major League Baseball is coming up on probably a pretty significant work stoppage. So there's not going to be any baseball for a year, probably. And why be holding on to that and have to come up with squirrel surfing when we can just go ahead and replace it now? And that's what young people are into. So how do we get them on that? I get that mode. It's one of those things in the off season here that's fun to look at, the kind of the business of sport. I've always found that fascinating. I know you have too, because we both have been on either side of that and have seen it. And now, as you say, as we push a different demographic area, we see it for, well, didn't we do this 30 years ago when it just was packaged different? Yeah, we did.
Right. And to your point, it seems like sports to me is being moved toward of an individual, and this would be another day on Donahue, as you said, but like what we're seeing with Caitlin Clark in the NBA, WNBA, just for an example, and you probably started with Michael Jordan, these things move very slowly, but I have found myself like, just briefly, I'm of the opinion that Tom Brady is, the greatest quarterback in NFL history. And the way that I will argue that point is by saying there is no measurable piece of data that you can throw at me that will not. If you're a wins guy, he's got wins. If you're a rings guy, he's got rings. If you're a stats guy, he's got stats. There is nothing that you can come at me that is going to knock me off of that he is the best. However you want to judge it, people will come at you and say, "Well, he's not as athletic as Aaron Rodgers." Do I care? Well, I don't.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Jay. There are people that do.
Yeah, no, I hear it all the time, and I think you're right. It's one thing about building stars. When you build individual stars, then everything gets related to them, but their skills don't replicate in comparison to somewhere else. I don't compare Michael Jordan's game to Akeem Olajuwon's.
Right.
They're both all-time greats. They didn't play the same kind of game. They weren't asked to do the same things. Or maybe give you another one, a guy that was a central part of a team for years. Tim Duncan and Michael Jordan carried franchises through their career, through 20 years apiece, but they played very different kinds of basketball. You can't compare either of them to each other, and it would be foolish to do so. But you're right, younger people in particular, it's easier to lack into a star, right? So how do we build this star? We make everything about the star. And if then that extrapolates into following the team, great. But even if they just follow the star, you know what it is? They're watching. And that's what we want. We want people watching.
That's right. And you nailed it earlier, the TikTok thing. It's like, I don't know who won this game. I don't know what the final score was. All I know was I saw this clip on Sports Center or on TikTok or on Instagram or ever what of this running back running over 6 people and scoring a touchdown. Now, with the game on the line, he fumbled and they lost the game. But man, I don't care. That's the most badass run I've ever seen in my entire life. And that is increasingly, I think, the way younger folks view it.
Let's also not downplay the rise of fantasy sports, particularly among younger people, and then the gateway that is into gambling, which is built a lot like fantasy sports. You're following individual players and stats versus following the way a team succeeds. You may have the top, your top fantasy player is a running back on a team that doesn't even make the playoffs, but he scores all the points for you because he scores all the points for his team that year.
Right.
That can happen. I mean, it's a changing the way that sports are marketed and done. And again, there's reasons there's people that are running those companies and we're not. Maybe one day they'll let us do it, but I'm not going to hold my breath for it. I'm going to keep coming into work as it is. So, well, Matthew, we're here at the end of Sportsball Grinder. Man, thanks so much for coming on and talking racing and football and all kinds of other stuff. We'll definitely have you back on. You're going to be part of our cadre of guests in the fall when we start doing games and pick'ems and stuff. But really appreciate your insights, and we'll have you on as we get close to the NASCAR playoffs as well.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Well, again, folks, thanks for joining us wherever you're listening to the show, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Give us a follow, give us a like, share the show on your socials. We appreciate it. You can also write to the show, sportsballgrinder@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts, your hot takes. We'll go through another mailbag episode every month or so here. Be glad to listen to those, and we appreciate the support. Until next time, stay in the grind.
For the casuals, we're grinding it out. Talking sports without the doubt. No